Welcome to this episode of the Strong Kind podcast. This episode is with Jordan Wigger. Jordan is the owner of Low Country Athletics in Summerville, South Carolina. Jordan is a weightlifting coach. He's just a coach, honestly. Jordan's a really good coach. I think when it comes down to it, the reason that I appreciate and had a great conversation with Jordan is because he cares about people. He cares about helping people succeed, and ultimately thrive for long periods of time. We talked about youth athletic development, not burning out, training well, and a lot of the things we talked about are really good analogies for life, not just lifting. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Like it, subscribe, share it. Appreciate you being here, and thanks so much. Toward the cloud. All right, so Jordan hopped on, and then he's like, we've moved our space, and he got into it, and then I immediately was like, no, I want to hear this story because this is like gym ownership in a nutshell to me.
Oh my gosh, dude.
So Jordan owns Low Country Barbell. Where are you at in South Carolina?
Well, now we are Low Country Athletics.
Low Country Athletic. All right, so name change.
So, yeah, we still have Low Country Barbell, but we have like wrestling club. I have a couple like endurance, like running athletes and stuff that I've been programming for. So I felt like Barbell Club wasn't a good label for all the things that we do now.
Yeah, that's good for you too, because I think there's something to being relatively inclusive, especially if you want to be. Like, if you just want to do barbell stuff, like,
That's
great.
correct. Yeah.
But like, I was having a conversation, not to sidetrack this very much,
Yeah.
but I was having a conversation with one of my mentors. His name's John Flagg, who, like, John Flagg is like a power lifter. Like, the dude is into powerlifting. He wants
Yeah.
to coach powerlifters. And I'm like, yeah, I just like dabbling in stuff. Like, I don't really have, like, I think the thing I'm going to keep competing in is Olympic lifting because I enjoy it. The meets don't take all freaking day.
Dude, that's yeah. So like
And
not to dump on other
no, 100%. Because
modalities,
I'll
but like
probably do some more powerlifting meets too.
mhm,
But like, we're starting to have kids, and like, I can go
rounds, bro.
and do a meet and be back in like the morning, right?
Weigh in, eat, 2 hours after weighing you start, 2 hours after you start, you're done. It's so
It's
fast.
nice. So
Dude,
nice.
you want to talk about
But
taking a weekend trip? Oh, amazing,
dude,
right?
powerlifting meets are like, you got to book a
All day.
hotel. The last meet I did, I literally drove up. I got up at 5. I drove 4 hours away because there's not very many meets in Iowa. Did the
Mhm.
meet, came back home, and was back home by like 3 o'clock. And it was like, yeah, this is dope. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, like, I like to dabble. Like, I enjoy running. I enjoy sprinting. I enjoy playing field
Yes.
sports, right? Like, I honestly just, if I do start a gym, the whole purpose of it will be to find people to play like basketball with, right?
Come be
Um,
my homie. Yeah.
but okay, so keep going. Tell us
Yeah.
about the move and the
Yeah.
chaos.
So the move is like, landlord lets us know that they're going to sell the building. We're not interested in purchasing the building. And then they find a buyer, they have a date, yada yada, all this stuff. But when we finally find a place, the day that we can be into the new spot is the day that we have to be out of the old spot. So, you rent a U-Haul, you call up all the homie members, right? You're like, yo, I need some hands. Um, and then like I broke everything down the night before. So there was no like actual like I didn't have to take the rig apart or like any of that kind of stuff. Um, but we moved the whole gym over, and then I had to catch a flight because Nicole was up on the next morning. Actually, she was on Sunday morning at like 8 in the morning. I think she weighed in at 6, something like that. Um, so
Nicole is one of his athletes that was competing in the
Yes.
American Open.
Nicole is my youth athlete. She's in the 14-15 age group division at she had to compete at Youth Nationals, USAW Youth Nationals, which was in Pittsburgh this year. So I finish driving the U-Haul with the last load of stuff to the gym. I get there at 3. I basically got out, gave the keys to somebody, and I was like, hey, you got to drop this off because I have to be at the airport in 15 minutes. So got a ride to the airport, hopped on the plane, just gross, sweaty. I felt so bad for the people next to me, but it's like, I can't do anything about it. Flew up, got into the Airbnb that Ryan is Nicole's sister who's traveling with her, or excuse me, Ryan is Nicole's brother. And then got in at like 10:30 or 11-ish to the Airbnb, and then woke up at like 5:45 the next morning to go to weigh-ins with the goalie. So yeah.
Damn.
And then that happened. Came back on like Monday or something. JJ had already started full time for us that week because he kind of needed to, because
Hmm.
obviously I was going to be gone. And then it was basically like try to put the gym together as much as I can for the week, and then fly out again on it was either Thursday or Friday for JJ, because he was also competing at nationals in Pittsburgh. And he got second out of the B session, which is a huge deal. Um,
That's so huge. I mean, JJ, I
dude,
follow that dude. He's unbelievable.
he
Like,
is like, he's so positive, man. It's so hard to explain to people how like good-hearted he is.
yeah,
Um,
he
and
seems like
also,
a very nice, kind dude, but
dude,
he's also so freaking
he's
strong.
also a monster, man. He is crazy.
Yeah,
Um,
which is really good. I mean, and like that's the
yeah,
thing, because is he pretty young? Like he's a pretty young lifter.
he's
Like,
23.
okay, all right,
Yeah, so he's been Olympic lifting for 4 years.
okay,
And he powerlifted a little bit before that. But I know you want to talk a little bit about development. That'll be a good talk, I
yeah,
think,
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
I think part of the reason why he's done so well and why things still look very like easy, it doesn't look like he's really like overreaching or anything right now. It's because I've just made every single time that there's a decision for him, whether we can make a decision better for short term or for long term. I've always made the whatever decision would be better for long term. I make that one every
yeah.
time,
Yeah.
and it can
That's
be really,
powerful. That's a very good lesson. Ah, man, that just right there, that heuristic. The
yep.
funny thing about that heuristic is that if you do that, you'll probably make more short-term progress too.
Well,
Because
eventually, right? Like, because
yeah,
eventually you
yeah,
just start to get momentum and everything compounds, and then you're just like doing crazy stuff.
yeah,
Because in the beginning, I remember being at States, like, hmm, this was probably like a year to a year and a half in for JJ, and he was snatching like 103. This may be before a year. I could be getting my timeline messed up, but he was only, I think his third snatch attempt was like 103, and his third clean and jerk was like 125, right? Which, like, we don't even open his snatches at 125 anymore. I think at nationals he opened at like 145. Um,
that's so freaking
Stupid, stupid,
ridiculous.
yeah. But I remember people being like, "Dude, this is so easy. Why is he not doing more weight?" And I was like, "He's been doing it like a year. Like,
Yeah,
like I care more about the quality of our movement right now. And that's not to say I'm like holding him back or like being
yeah,
super picky about little things. I'm like, I just want it to look like, I want it to look great. I
yeah,
want any lift that we take to look like it's easily doable. We're not overreaching for anything. We're building really, really consistent patterns so that when we get heavy later on, he defaults to the good patterns that we've been building for so long, right?
yeah, yeah,
Like the timing of his lifts is really good. He's always catching the bar generally at the right time, not like trying to rush it or trying to force positions or any of that stuff. And I think most of that is because I've just tried to take as much time as we can in developing him,
hmm,
and his technique. Because
yeah,
I think a lot of people they start getting a new pattern down and then they want to rush it and be like, oh, I can do 80% the way that I want it to look now. Let me see if I can hit a new one rep max. And it's really
yeah,
like, that's great. Let's do that at 80% and then spend 2 months getting to where we can do it at 90%, and then spend 2 months doing it at 95 plus. And then we can talk about new maxes, because then it's our new like default method of
yeah.
doing what we're doing.
I think one of the things that I'm really trying to do a better job of with my own stuff, because I've just been overreaching for like the last like since my last competition. And it's, you're in your garage and I think it's just what people get in your head is, all right, you hit, and I think people do this really with powerlifting, is you
Mhm.
hit meet day PRs,
Yes.
right? And then you're like, that kind of becomes your new baseline for like what you think you can hit. And then you just try to reach for it too much in your
Yes.
training, right?
Yes.
And it really like I went in and I like strained my groin and I strained my calf running because like just being me being me, which is like working my butt off. But
Fair.
like yesterday, I just hit a bunch of like clean and jerks at like 95, which is not impressive.
Yeah.
But I moved really well and they all felt crisp and like, all right, this is what you need to do on a more regular set basis. And then,
Yes.
in a little while, do that with 100, right? And then do that with 105. And
Mhm.
then like that's really like this kind of like phasic approach works, I think, for a lot. It doesn't mean you don't push. It just means that like you
Yes.
just are smart. Like if you're feeling really good, like cook, like go
Yeah.
at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if like days where you're not feeling, just like find the weight, like, and this is why I know you use VBT, velocity based training, to
Yeah.
some extent. I don't know the extent you use it, but like that is, I don't think everybody needs to like utilize VBT all the time, but if you're
Agreed.
like if you're having terrible sessions, like putting that thing on and being like, oh shit, okay, this is my weight, or this is my speed threshold, my
Yeah.
velocity threshold.
Hmm.
All right, keep it in there until you start feeling good, and then you can, keep
And then
going
you
back to
can
where you're
go
at,
from
right?
there.
Like
Yeah.
that's what people don't do well with,
Yeah.
right?
So two things with that. I have a lifter named Skylar. Love Skylar to death. I've actually known Skylar for like almost 20 years, right? We grew
Yep.
up wrestling together, yada yada. But he was a garage warrior for a long time, and he still does stuff in his garage, probably once or twice a week. But he had that issue. He would be in his garage and just want to go heavy all the time. It's like every single snatch workout turned into a heavy single. And he needed somebody to help him pull back and not just keep trying to reach. Because you said the thing about meet days, like meet, you're peaked, right? Generally speaking, you're amped up on caffeine or something, right?
Yep. Yep.
And also energy of meets are different, even than training in like a gym, much less your own garage, right?
Yeah.
So all of that, it's this big thing that usually gets built up for you. So your adrenaline's usually like going crazy. The numbers that you hit in meets are probably not numbers that you're going to hit in training if you structure your training well, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of people that can hit stuff way heavier in training than they do in competition. And I think that also has a lot to do with the development of competing well. So not to bring it back to him, but JJ, most of his PRs, if not all of his PRs in the last 2 or 3 years have been at meets.
Yeah.
And that's on purpose. I
Yeah.
sometimes don't let him take PRs in
Yeah.
training, unless it's like silly, right? If we're 4 months out from like, his next big meet that we're going to do and he's looking like a monster,
Yeah.
sure, right? We'll go for something. But generally speaking, I'm like, I don't want it now. I don't want the extra fatigue that comes with it now. I don't want any of that. Just wait. Just
Yeah.
wait. And when it's time, let's do it.
Yeah.
And I think the way you develop that is always making sure that people go, like in weightlifting, he has six attempts. Powerlifting, there's 9.
Yeah.
People should be going 7 for 9 or 5 for 6 or better, I think, at every meet.
Yeah. 100%.
Unless you're, at Worlds, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Different conversation. But for developing people, you want people to step on platforms at meets and be like, I make lifts,
Yeah.
right? I go out, I go I hit stuff. I hit PRs on the platform. That's what I do, right?
Yeah.
Building that mindset for people is just as important as the training, because who cares if you can hang snatch, 15 kilos higher than your meet PR in training if you can't do it at a meet, if that's what we're doing this for, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you're doing it just to have fun and meets are fun time, sure, go for it. But if you want to take it more seriously, I think developing the mindset of I'm clutch, all that kind of stuff is important just as much as any of the other stuff that you do.
I think you align with this because you follow my content and I follow your content. I'm like,
Yeah.
at the core of what we're trying to do, like, and I think what the core of good coaching and coaches do is like, you're trying to build confidence and belief alongside the physical outputs, right? And like,
Yes.
when I see people that like, I'll go coach, like I have lifters that powerlift, and like I'm not an amazing powerlifter. Like I like powerlifting, but when I go see people who like they bomb their first attempt, I'm like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Like if you don't set them up for success with like their first and second attempts should pretty much be like, we know you're going to hit these. Maybe your second attempt, and it's context dependent. Like
Yes.
if you're trying to like PR and like the athlete knows that this is the plan, that's another big piece of it. Then that's one thing. But like when I see people, and it happens at every meet you go to,
Somebody
people
misses
miss
first.
their first attempt. And it's just like that psychologically is so deflating. And like a lot of us, like, yeah, we're doing this for fun and recreation, but that's like getting sacked on the first freaking play of the game from scrimmage. It's just like super deflating, right? So there's a lot of components to that I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
um do you follow Will Rattel at
I
all?
do. Yes, I do. I like
So
Will.
he's kind of like the dude I don't think cares about like Olympic lifting the sport at
Yeah.
all.
Uh-huh.
He
I'd agree
just
with that.
cares about like Olympic lifting for performance and confidence and stuff. And so I
Yes.
wanted to get your take on like, because there is a dichotomy, right? If your
Mhm.
goal is to be a really good platform lifter, I do think what the approach you're talking about is like super important, right? If your goal is to just go and throw around heavy weights all the time, this is the other thing I was going to ask you about.
Mhm.
Is I think what Will Rattel's basic philosophy is, and I'm actually going to have him on the podcast like next week, so I
Oh,
won't
great.
ask him.
That's awesome.
But like hit variations that build confidence, like, and that just always be trying to PR like complexes, variations, right? um because that teaches you to move well. So is there any difference in how you would approach somebody who wants to Olympic weightlift as part of like general training versus somebody who wants to be competitive and take it on like at a sport level, or do you generally
Yes.
approach them the same?
No, they're definitely different, right? For people that are going to do it in competition, I think the closer you get to competition, your frequency is going to go up. And that's mainly because like you're really trying to hit uh, technique development and fine tuning of technique as you get like closer and closer to competition. But for people that are just looking to do it to get the benefit of it from like an athletic development standpoint or whatever, it's not nearly as important to be so frequent, right? Um, you know, for somebody who's higher level, just because we've talked about him, JJ, for example, he snatches like probably 4 times a week when we get close to comp. So last like, and not every session is heavy, right? There's like variations and blah blah blah, whatever. Split all the hairs. But for somebody that just wants to like like if I have a runner, one of my distance runners, Ross, right? He cleans twice a week at most. Usually it's once a week, but twice a week is the most that we'll ever really do it because he doesn't need much more than that if we're going to get the benefit of the activity.
Yeah.
As far as like the way that Will does stuff, I think it's great. His concurrent program is pretty solid if people are looking for like something that's a good place to get started to figure out like what you like that's like varied and has a lot of different elements put into it. I think it's great.
There's a lot of people right now who are putting out like very good concurrent and like well-rounded programs if
Yep.
you are able to follow them. Like
Yep.
my biggest thing is like most people don't actually follow like written stuff
Yeah.
like very well, right? But
Yeah.
his program is either like it is very good, and the key to it is like it's really simple. Like
Mhm.
he's not an
Not complicated.
overcomplicator,
Yeah. And
right? And
it doesn't need to be effective, right?
100%. That's
Yeah.
the biggest misconception I think a lot of people have is like that dude is absolutely a monster, and like
Oh,
he
he's
just does
crazy.
simple stuff, right?
Mhm.
And does it well. So yeah.
Yeah, no, but I don't think there is definitely a difference. At the end of the day, like, yeah, you're still hoping to get a certain thing from the exercises that you're doing and stuff. But weightlifting is a sport. It's kind of like if you say, um, I want to train to be a high jumper, right, in track and field. And then you have somebody else that just wants to be able to jump high so they can play basketball, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
those two training things are not the same. One is going to be very specific jumping in a very specific way because in competition, there's a lead up. It's not from a standing start, yada, yada, all that stuff. And the other person is still hoping to get the benefit of, feedback that comes from that activity, but they don't need to worry about their approach. They don't need to worry about, how much ground contact time they have as they're trying to get over the bar or whatever, right? The specifics don't have to be so dialed in. And you can still get crazy without having to do all the specific stuff too. It just takes patience and time and trying not to force and like overreach on stuff, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing about I can just say differentiating like
Mhm.
getting a program and running a program is good. It's great. Working with a coach and where you create like the virtuous cycle of this is what I'm seeing and these are the adjustments I need to make. Like that's a different ball game for a lot
It's
of people,
way different. Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
that's one of the big things that like because I don't think everybody needs a coach. I do think a lot of people would benefit from going through phases where they work with a coach.
Mhm.
Because it just helps you see your weaknesses and it also just gives you better insight into the training process, right? And I'm not gonna make claim that I'm like a great coach, but like I try to study coaches. Um, so like let's go back to JJ,
Yes. Back to
right?
Jaden.
Like because you have a very good coaching relationship with him at this pace. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
how and let's talk about like athletic development. Like where do you, or what do you look at for somebody like who wants to be high level, like what are the key performance indicators, or what are the things that you want to see him doing and that he wants to do
Yeah.
throughout his like competitive season or off season, that like what are the things you're measuring and thinking about and trying to help him with, versus somebody who's like more of a generalist or more fitness
Yeah.
oriented, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's complicated, and it's only complicated in the sense that like I still need his general fitness qualities to be pretty high, right? And this is something that I flipped on probably about 3 or 4 years ago. I really did like not a big 180, but I used to be very much like phasic structure. Here's phase one, phase two, phase three. We do general phase, strength phase, and then we peak and blah 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 and all that stuff. And I think phasic structure for the competition lifts that you're going to do is a great idea. I
Really
think
good,
that's
good point.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yes. I think if we're talking about squat, bench, deadlift, and we're talking about snatch, clean, and jerk, dude, phasic structure all day. But the rest of your training should not be phasic in nature
Yeah.
outside of just controlling for general volume, right?
Yeah.
Like if we're peaking his general volume on his other stuff of, what I would say like general work capacity, he does cardio like 2, 3 days a week, not a ton. There's like 15 to 20 minutes steady state on a bike, right?
Yeah.
Like that stuff's always going to be his program permanent. It's not
Yeah.
going away because a healthy lifter is going to stay healthy for longer and make more progress longer than somebody who doesn't have any cardiovascular capability whatsoever, right? Um, so I'll do like phasic for snatch, clean, and jerk and his squats, and then everything else is still pretty general. I actually just erased it on the board, but I had his weekly schedule because he's starting up training again. I make him take some time off after big meets, like 2 to 3 weeks. We
Yeah.
either do nothing at all or maybe like 2 days a week at the most.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
force him to take a big break, like a big reset. And then when we come back in, we only snatch, clean, and jerk pretty much once a week. And then all of his other stuff is really general. So like right now he's got squatting twice a week, he's pulling once a week, like heavy pulling. And then everything else is like general development. Plyometrics, jumping, some bodybuilding, there's some core stuff and some like coordination stuff in there. But that stuff is gonna stay in. It just depends on how much of it I put in. And I everything that used to be phasic for me, like all of it was, right? Like we had a bodybuilding phase and all of his accessories would be sets of like 10 to 12. And then the next phase would be, okay, we're going to do sets of 6 to 8. And now all your accessories are 4 to 6. Like I don't do that anymore. I still keep like general rep count and stuff like that within certain ranges, depending on how much he's doing other stuff. But it's much more like I just keep trying to generally develop him as an athlete. We just have times where we're focusing more on the competition lifts and less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I'm glad to hear you say that, because so I attract a lot of tryhards like myself. And these are these people who want to train 5 days a week forever, and like, or and it's not to say like that can't work. Like it's
Yeah.
just, you have to be okay. Like if people are like, oh, like take 2 weeks off, or just take 2 weeks and just go ride your bike.
Yeah.
Like, but people
What
like
else? Just go do something that's not this. Yeah.
go, yeah, go recharge your battery, right? And I think so many people, the fitfluencer and the hardcore world has just programmed people to be like, I'm gonna lose all of my fitness. And it's like, if that were true, you would be so we'd be all be screwed,
We'd be
right?
in so much trouble. Yeah.
And that's kind of the same thing with a lot of the other stuff, like a lot of the narratives. It's like, if I always think about like, if you don't believe that most things are at least like 75% graded exposure, like if you don't believe that most of rehab is graded exposure, like we would be screwed,
Yeah.
because like the mechanical way of fixing stuff would just mean that more people were way broken. Like there wouldn't
Yeah.
be people walking around with like herniated discs with no pain,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And like, so it'd be either yes or no, we fix this or not.
Yeah.
And so it's good to hear that high level person, take a couple weeks off, right? And
Well,
then reintroduce at a rate that is also relatively like low key. It's still challenging, and you're still going to challenge them, but you're going
oh yeah.
to, it's building, it's essentially again building another base, or base building.
Well, and further on the whole like taking days off or weeks off or like the hardcore people of like, no days off, we go to work every day. I had this conversation with a wrestling parent recently because wrestling down here in Charleston is like, dude, I mean, we got people age 8 to 10 starting to go year round super early. It's a huge problem in Charleston in general. Soccer's like that,
Yeah.
swimming's like that, baseball, football, whatever you want to name it, it's probably year round already, right? It's nuts. And so I was talking with this parent about it, and I was like, yeah, like we're gonna wind down because there's this big, wrestling tournament going on in the summer, and then after that, I want the kids to take like 2 to 3 months off. He's like, oh man, like, should we still do stuff? I was like, yeah, like pick a different sport, or like if you guys want to come in and just do like some weightlifting training, or just want to do some gym stuff with me, like that's fine too. But take time off. And I was like, don't you want time off from your job? And the parents like, yeah, of course I do. I was like, do you think kids are any different than we are? If anything, they probably have less grind capacity than
Yeah.
we do as adults. Like, what do you mean kids shouldn't have time off from whatever their activity is? And it's not to say that they need to be inside playing video games or whatever. And some of it's not bad, but
There's also a component of like free play
yes.
versus competitive practice.
Well, and I told them too, it was like find a sport and then do it for fun. Don't
Yeah.
try to be good. Like, yeah, try to be better at it and get better and all those things, but do it for the purpose of just having a good time doing a physical activity. That's not the thing that you take super, super, super serious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a giant problem. And I think because me and you are like, I look at it as like a health practitioner and a coach.
Yeah.
And I know you look at it as a former wrestler and a coach and, like all sorts of things. Like, this is the hard thing about like working with parents is like parents want something and like they know the kid kind of wants something, but there's often just a giant differentiation like who wants this, like,
Yeah.
and is this in the best interest for the kid, or is it in the best interest of the parents, the dad most likely, that
Yeah. I
started the
mean,
travel year-round team
yeah.
that is selection oriented, and then the league that is year-round and selection oriented. Like, we're just burning kids out, and we're burning their body, and we're most often it's like we're just burning out their ability to actually want to do
They
stuff.
want to do
Like,
anything. Yeah. They're constantly being pushed, and some of that is intrinsic, but some of it isn't, right? Like there's always external pressure on kids to do things. People don't mean it this way, but like, people coming up to like, I mean, JJ is a good example of this specific thing. People come up and be like, oh, like you're going to go to the Olympics. Maybe you will, right? Who knows? But
yeah,
like that puts pressure on people. And I don't think people mean it to be that way. What
yeah,
people mean when they say this, oh, you're gifted. I can't wait to see where you go, all that stuff. But they're not saying those words. They're saying, I can't wait till you win nationals. I can't wait till
yeah,
you get to compete
yeah,
internationally for Team USA. And
yeah,
that puts pressure on people to feel the need to fulfill those like visions that other people have for them, right?
yeah, yeah.
The
It's
purpose of
one thing when it comes from the person themselves. It's
yeah,
another when like, I mean, less than one. I think it's less than like, I think it's even less than like a tenth of 1% of athletes ever go like pro, and
yeah.
that might even be. I think that is what it is. Like,
For
and
wrestling, it's like less than 0.5% of the kids that wrestle in high school wrestle at college.
yeah, and so
Yeah.
it's small fractions of the whole
Yes.
that still get put like people. I mean, like I was not a gifted athlete at all, right? I loved playing soccer. That was probably if I could have played a college sport, it would have been I could have played like D2 soccer.
Yeah.
And like, but this is the hard part about like being a kid or being like looking back as an adult. It's like what it's not, it's good to chase something, but like also have it be loose, because like I wanted to play like pro soccer at some point, and
This
then
is this is perfect because the nenext thing I was about to say is youth sports is really about teaching kids to enjoy the process and
yeah,
not the end goal, right? When
100%.
things become about the end goal, everything falls apart, right? That's when you start overreaching in your garage sessions. That's
Yeah,
when you start doing practice for a couple months longer than you probably should and taking time off, right? That's when you start putting pressure on kids to accomplish a very specific thing. And here's, are you going to get better at something if you have fun doing it or when you feel forced and obligated to do it?
it's so wild because people don't think about it like that at all.
That's
Like,
exactly what it should be. Like,
yeah,
if we're not having fun doing the activity because we're doing it too much and we're burnt out and we can't enjoy all the things that are special about it anymore, and it's not special, we're not going to get better. Like, it doesn't make any sense. People will be like, oh, well, we want to get them a head start. They don't need a head start,
No.
right? If
Yeah.
you want to hit your skill peak at the time when you're 18 to 22, why would you ever want to start trying to get specifically good at just those skills for that sport at the age of 8, right? If we're talking about building a giant pyramid of ability and the peak of that is going and competing at like this high level for whatever the sport is, dude, it takes forever to build that base. You should
Dude.
be spending the majority of your time building the base.
Have you read Range by David
Yes.
Epstein?
Yeah.
Like, so because it really, he does a great job in that book of being like, all right, Tiger Woods, Roger Federer,
Yeah.
arguably the two greatest. Michael Jordan. I'd probably throw Michael Jordan up there. I love Michael Jordan.
Well, and also in wrestling, Jordan Burroughs didn't really start wrestling
Dude,
crazy until he was in high school, right?
yeah, right. So,
Yeah.
but the people they think about Tiger, and like honestly, I kind of think a lot of this is like my own personal opinion. A lot of Tiger's like 20 to 30-year-old woes and like personality quirks because like the dude had so much pressure on him from an early age, right?
Yeah.
And Roger Federer had a really positive relationship with like sport and himself,
Yes.
right? And he also had this base of getting to play a bunch of different sports. And ultimately, like, arguably too, like Tiger's body has kind of broken down a little bit on him. And I
Yeah.
think there's psychological aspects of this as well.
Sure.
But Federer played forever and like played really well forever. And same with like Rafa, and like tennis is also a really awesome sport. Like I love tennis.
Yeah.
But people don't see that. They see, oh, they don't correlate that. He's like, he must have started playing tennis really early.
Yeah.
And even just how his parents, like, they didn't push him at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and like what you said there too. Let's go to a little bit of, and I think this is, again, me and you are more informed, so it's
Yeah.
something that I'm just trying to help people understand too, is like specific performance is actually the aggregate of a bunch of general qualities applied to the rules of your game,
100%.
right?
Yes.
Like, and people don't get that because people are trying to like, I just saw a drill. Somebody put like a quarterback drill. It was so stupid, like hitting them with a ball. And I was like, that's not gonna stop that guy from, when a 300-pound person hits
Hits
that
you,
dude.
doesn't matter. Yeah.
It's not about having a specific drill. It's about, are you strong enough and are you physically capable of to like take
Of
the
dealing
hit?
with that impact. Yes.
Exactly,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Little drill's not really going to help you that much.
No.
It's
Maybe the specific circumstance of like tucking, like that,
sure.
there's some turnover there. It's
Yeah.
better than not doing anything, probably.
But is it the
But
best use of your time?
yeah,
Not
100%.
even
Right?
close.
Not.
Well, the other thing that comes with all this too is what you really want kids to get good at, and the whole point of general development up until like 14 to 16 years old is you want them to get good at learning new skills.
Yeah.
Skill acquisition is a skill in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
Especially with something as complicated as wrestling, because wrestling really changes. Like you have like 8 years and younger, and it's really like a flop fest. And then you have like 8 to 12 years old, and then kids start to hit puberty, and then everything changes. And then even once you get past that, once you get to like, now we're talking about grown men, like 18 to 20 years old and up, you want people to be able to learn new skills all the time. If you hit a skill ceiling super early, you're not learning more stuff, right? You can be the kid that wins youth nationals age 13 to 15, but who knows about those people? Like, who knows those names? And I don't mean it like that, but if we're talking about the pinnacle of sport, if that's what you really care about, like, you should be trying to peak later. And it's so hard because everything is so geared towards short term now.
Yeah.
I mean, just society in general, right? How much of it is just instant, instant, instant? I get this thing back right when I want it. I got Amazon Prime. I'm gonna order my thing and get it in 2 days at the longest, whatever. Like, we need to get used to people playing the long game and understanding that that's really better for us, right? Um, and I just don't think that's the way that people are viewing it. Everybody wants to be, well, I want to win nationals next year. It's like, why? Like, what if we could win nationals 4 times in a row 8 years from now?
Dude.
Or we could just win it 2 years from now and then we burn out and we're done because you've been wrestling for 24 months straight, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense.
It's funny because like I think about this all the time.
Mm.
Like humans have always been fast gratification, or like I don't know if I can't say that we've always been this way, but like
Yeah.
you look at dopamine as like it's a pursuit chemical, which I
Yeah.
think is a big reframe. Like, but when it was really hard to live, like, and you're just surviving like an animal, like you get a giant reward from stuff. And as soon as we like got smart enough to accelerate that process, we
Mhm.
became both our like it became good for us from like achieving things and goal oriented stuff, but bad for us like if you don't have, like, for lack of a better word, like discipline, right?
Yeah.
And
If
our
you can't,
environment.
if you can't buy into a process, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
100%, right? Because like it's basically, and this is why like cliches are so hard for people. Like, ah, man, but it's so
Yeah.
true, right? Like
Yeah.
you if you want to have a good retirement, or if you want to have money when you're older, like you got to start putting some away when you're younger, right?
You gotta play
If
the
you
long
want
game.
to, like, the benefit of going to the gym, it does feel good. I like to go lift. I like to train. I like to move, right?
There are
But
short-term benefits there for sure.
a
Absolutely.
100%. But like the things you really want to have happen, which usually aren't when you get to those things, doesn't really matter that much. Like when people like get to the physique they wanted, like they usually want more, or they are like not that satisfied,
Never satisfied. Yeah.
right? And so it is like it's learning that, yeah, the process is everything, and enjoying that process, and then like kind of the reminder, like, what am I doing this for? Like for somebody like JJ, like the potential is there, right?
Yeah,
Super cool.
100%. And that's something that he and I talked about from the jump, right? Like I I think, not to skew back, but your conversation about people that need a coach and people that don't is, if you have very specific goals that you want to get to, most people, like even me myself, like JJ writes my programming right now.
Yeah.
Even though I write his stuff, I've written stuff for years, blah blah blah, whatever. Like I don't think there's anybody out there who's like Jordan has no idea what he's doing. That's not the case.
I can't write my own
Yeah, I
programs because
don't
I
write
just
my own. Yeah,
blow them
because
up.
dude, yeah, I'm bad at it, right? I don't listen to myself. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I know better. I'll do, whatever.
Yeah.
Like if you need somebody to help you understand how to enjoy the process more, like I think that's when coaching is good for you, because there are times when, like, I've got young kids and stuff that approach me and be like, "Oh, I want to be like, I want to go and compete at nationals. I want to do this. I want to compete for Team USA." And usually I'm like, "Look, I hear you. I understand that's the goal. I'm going to do everything that I can to get you there, but we have to play the longest game possible."
Yeah.
And that's usually how I phrase, like, I put that up at the front, right? I'm like, we are always going to play the long game. If there's any time that you feel like we could take this little shortcut and maybe like get somewhere a little bit quicker, that means we're adding time on the back end,
Yeah.
right? So I think framing it when people first get started too, and being like, making the long game decisions are always going to be better. I think that's helpful for framing the way that they're going to view training, so that they don't try to take, I don't want to say shortcuts, because it makes it seem like there's some easy way, but it's really just the overreaching conversation again,
It
right?
it it really is that the hardest thing to convey to people is that you have to push, but pushing too hard is not necessarily advantageous,
Yeah.
depending on
Well, and
what you're trying to do.
your coach is there to push you when you need it
And
and
put
pull back when you need it,
Yeah.
right? Because they're the person that's going to be objective about it, that has the expertise or experience and yada yada and all those things that you're looking for, and that's why you work with them, right?
This is another thing I just want to go to kind of
Yeah.
tangentially here, is
Mhm.
like the other thing that people are, it's really hard work. It's not really hard. It's better. We have way more access to information than people did 20 or 30 years ago, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But what also people have access to is seeing what they think other people are doing,
Yeah.
right? And this brings me back to like somebody like Will Rattel, like,
Yeah.
because and I'm gonna ask him, because I'm pretty sure the dude probably takes like 2 full rest days a week,
Oh
but
yeah.
he puts up like him hitting a giant lift like 6 days a week.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that puts in your brain, it's like, I gotta go train harder, I gotta go do this thing. And it's like, no, like I think I have a client now who ran his like train heroic concurrent training, and they're like, I did 6 days of this for like 3 weeks, and I just feel really beat up. And he's like, well, dude, take rest days. Like I do this like 4 times a week.
Yeah.
And or like, and I think there is something to like going and riding a bike for 20 minutes on your off days, like that's not training,
That's
right? If
yeah,
you're,
yeah.
like
And you're
that's
not
okay.
getting in the mindset,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
physical place that you have to be in to do it is not the same, right? Like,
Yeah.
and on
It's
top of
no
that,
pressure.
yeah, on top of that, the power lifter that I have, JP, right?
Who's also super friggin' strong.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
Nuts. He only trains 4 days a week.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And he wants more. But I'm like, why? We keep making progress. Like, why do more? We don't need to.
Exactly. Right.
If you so like we did a little bit of ollie for him because he wanted to try it out, just see how he liked it and all that kind of stuff. But we're kind of switching more back to just powerlifting. But I mean, the dude went from a 275 power clean to like 350 in like 6 to 8 months or something. But like he only cleaned once a week, right? Like what we did do is we did plyometrics since we started, right?
Yeah.
We jumped, we did lots of like things to increase power. Like almost none of his stuff is tempo, right?
Yeah.
And this is another thing that I've really been like harping on people lately is if you want to be strong, stop doing tempo concentric. Stop, right?
Oh yeah.
Research that
I've never understood, like I
so many
understand
people don't
tempo
understand.
eccentric because
Yeah,
if
for
you're
sure.
out of position fundamentally, it's
Yes.
hard to produce force in a fast manner, right? But
Yeah.
I never
Tempo
get,
eccentric pauses, great.
yeah.
Tempo concentric, it's completely opposite of what you want. And I think it comes from like bodybuilding because
Yeah.
people misinterpret the research. It's like, oh, when reps are slower, you build more muscle. But it's really when the reps are slower because you don't have an option.
Because you
If
have
you
to, yeah, the weight
because
is
you've already
hard.
fatigued all the fibers,
Yeah.
exactly, right? So, but it like that myth will not die, and it's infuriating.
Yeah.
Not infuriating, but it's just like I feel like I have the same conversation with new people every time where I'm like, every time you squat, I want you to stand up as fast as you can, no matter what. And they're like, really? I'm like, yes. But that's all we did for his stuff. Like, and as far as the whole conversation of whether we're doing something because we want to be good for weightlifting on the platform or just be good at it, like again, he only cleaned once a week when we went from that 275 to 350 number. We didn't do anything crazy, right?
Well, I don't think people and I sometimes struggle with this is like
Mm,
how much fatigue degrades your ability to perform, right? And a lot of the time, like
Not
you
even
can,
perform, to train.
yeah, that's a
Not
very good
even
way.
perform, to train at the numbers that you need to get better. If you're too fatigued, you can't load enough to get better, or you can't load enough to challenge it in the way that you need to get to the next part because you're too beat up and too beat down.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And it's like, so it's funny because my wife just printed off something and she walked down here and like it was a few weeks ago. And I'm like, God, I just feel like really beat up. And she's like, well, you're overtraining. Like, and she's like, I'm like, you don't know that. And she's like, I 100% know. Like, cause you're like going and you're crushing yourself. You're trying to get back into sprinting a little bit more. And then you went and ran 5K hard. I know you ran it hard. She's just like, this is the power of like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
partner, right? But like, and just knowing your personality, which combating neuroticism, you're like, this is another big reason to work with a coach is like, um, is it is very hard to be objective with ourself, right? But like just having a little bit of distance and having a relationship with somebody who trust. And this is one thing that when I first started coaching, like if people said I want to work out 6 days a week, I would be like, okay. And like I would give them what they wanted, right?
yeah.
And then I saw them like go through the normal woes of trying too hard 6 days a week. And I'm like, all right, here's the deal. You get 3 hardish days, and then you get 3 days and one of like that are optional.
We're gonna move and push blood around.
Yeah, you're just literally going and chilling out, and there should be no pressure to perform.
Yes.
And that just goes so much better for
Yeah.
people. But
It's
like,
it's this like in the beginning, you're like, oh, I'm gonna give people what they want. And then at some point you're like, oh, I need to give people what they need. And then
yes,
at some point you're like, I need to meet what people need and what they want. And I gotta find the happy medium in the middle because whatever they want is the thing that's gonna keep them around and keep them feeling like they're making progress. Like some people have to go to the gym every weekday because that's just the routine.
yeah,
And when they get out of that routine, it all falls apart, right?
goes
For
to
some
shit.
people, yes, for some people, that's what it is. And I think the key, again, the key time of when like, do I need to find a coach or talk to somebody about this is when the thing that you want to do is it's not what you need and you need somebody to help you bridge the gap between the two. I
Yeah,
think that's another good indicator of a time that you need to go find somebody to talk to help you mesh the things together.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I gotta bounce in like 5 minutes, but
Oh,
this is kind of a good way to end this because it's
yeah.
like this is kind of, I hate to like the maturing in the gym, but maturing as a coach.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of people get into stuff from the perspective of like, I'll just use like the starting strength community. A lot of people get into lifting, from they find either CrossFit or that book, and then like this is the way, right?
It's,
And there's really like I really don't have a giant critique of like what starting strength is if you understand that like this is just if you take the principles of that and then don't try to smash yourself into that peg, right?
yes.
What I see too many people doing is they run an LP, they run like a linear progression and they get up to squatting 255 or 275, and because they didn't get to 405, this was me by the way, because they didn't get to 405, they think they failed it and they think they
Yeah.
need to rerun multiple LPs until they get out. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, you actually need to develop the broad spectrum of like, the people who make it to 405 on an LP, they're super freaking athletically gifted. Like,
Yeah.
or they're probably powerful people, they're probably pretty fit, they're probably really good responders. Like,
Yes.
and that's good.
Yeah.
But you need to go and actually like develop some power, right? And some like plyometric capacity and other general qualities.
Yes.
So that's like maturing as a coach. And you said you flipped, right? From
Mhm.
phasic stuff.
Dude, yeah. I used to be so hyper fixated on everything had to be linear. Everything. And I just, yeah, it's just not that way really. Or, it's the whole starting strength thing and like using that for an example. It's a way to get to a certain spot,
Yeah.
right? And the directions may get one person to one place and one person to another place. But that's only one way to get there. There are multiple ways to get to that thing, right? No one method is the end all be all. And now, one method may be the best thing that works for a certain kind of person, but that also doesn't mean that that's the only thing you should ever do with that person, too, right? Like exploring available options for different ways to get people to the same endpoint or to similar endpoints, I think is part of the coach's job, right? Like if you're a coach and you just demonize uh, you know, uh, not West Side, but what's the official name for it?
Conjugate.
Conjugate. If you just demonize conjugate and you don't know anything about it and you've never put somebody through a conjugate cycle, do you really know what's going on with it? And do you really have a valid critique of it? And I don't think so. Not to say that you need to try everything that's out there, right? Nobody's out here being like, you got to try functional patterns, but I
Nobody
think,
should try functional pattern.
I think,
That's the one I draw the line at.
yeah, yeah, that's the
Well,
line of the sand.
well, like you look at what Louis did in a
Mhm.
lot of ways is he just like instead of beating powerlifters up with the same like slow movements, he's like, we're gonna train for speed. Because
Yep.
that was like a lot of what he was like. It was power
And
and
I
and
don't think he interpreted that speed stuff correctly, but I do
yeah,
think he was right that like speed matters, right?
yeah,
Like faster bar speed is higher, higher force output,
yeah.
and you can't really get around that, right?
Yeah, I also think like you put a bunch of meatheads in a room that like feeding like I honestly kind of think training environment is probably the
It's
number one
huge,
indicator
big
of
deal.
a
Yeah.
lot of good stuff happening. Like
Yes.
so you get a lot of good stuff happening in those types of environments. And
Mhm.
yeah, like if you try to distill things down, and this is why I like following you, there's a lot of people saying the same thing in different ways. This is also like just a big this we don't want to get political here, but like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
like a lot of things people are just saying the same thing with slightly different interpretations. It's like what's the meat, what's the principles of this? And then okay, where do we like where do we
Particulars.
overlap and where are we different?
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
follow
yeah.
Brandon Accardi?
I do not. I don't know who that
Okay,
is.
he's Australian. Him and you like are I think on a very similar
Yeah. Send me his stuff. I'll definitely check
yeah,
it out.
I'll send you his stuff. But because I hadn't really thought about how much plyometric
Oh,
and jumps and even sprints can be really, I mean, I think all those things are awesome, but like towards the application of strength and power development,
you want to
like
talk about the highest forces you're ever going to experience?
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer, really,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
And a lot of it is that principle of like, okay, general ability to produce force. Like, I'm not a very fast guy. If
yeah.
I can improve my 100-meter sprint or my 40-meter sprint, like I'm
Mhm.
probably gonna improve my power clean.
Oh,
You
almost,
know,
yeah, almost assuredly, because you're
because it's
dealing with the threshold of forces, especially once you get to like the real top end stuff and the crazy, like
yeah,
crazy plyometrics or crazy fast sprinting and stuff like that. The forces those guys deal with are insane.
yes,
And if you can
yeah,
deal with that, dude, your squat's probably gonna go.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
100%.
So,
All right, man, this is good. I'll have you back on. We'll get
yeah.
even deeper. It's easy to just go off on tangents,
Yeah.
especially like it's easy to have fun conversations. So
Yeah.
we'll
No,
do
thanks
this
for having me,
again.
dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. This will probably be out next week, so I'll tag you in it and drop a
Yeah.
bio and all that type of
Sounds
stuff. So,
good.
all right,
Sweet.
man.
Thank you,
Have a good
sir.
weekend.
Have a good one.
Peace.
Bye.